Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into an intense 18-year legal dispute between TV Sky Shop Ltd and United India Insurance. At the heart of this case, a catastrophic fire, a colossal financial claim, and a supposedly missing paper trail that triggered an absolute labyrinth of corporate bureaucracy. And what makes this so fascinating is how we're going to unravel the mystery, by looking directly at the corporate images. We're talking actual internal emails, flowcharts, and the official repudiation letters that served as the battlefield for this two-decade war. Let's get right into it.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll be covering the 37-hour inferno, a 17 crore claim, the war of surveyors, the missing paper trail, and finally, the final repudiation.
Section 1. The 37-hour inferno.
Okay, to make sense of the corporate maze that comes later, we really need to understand the inciting incident. And honestly, nobody in this entire 18-year dispute denies this actually happened. The date is September 22, 2008. It's about 11 p.m. at an industrial estate in District Thane. A watchman notices the lights flickering. Soon after, sounds like firecrackers start echoing through the property, and thick smoke just starts billowing out. A devastating fire had broken out, and it was so fierce that even with the fire brigade on the scene, it took a grueling 37 hours just to put the flames out.
The destruction was absolute. TVC Sky Shop marketed consumer lifestyle products, and literally their entire stock was gutted. Their advertisement film library destroyed. Computers and operational equipment completely melted. And, absolutely crucially for our story, all physical accounting records just turned to ash. Everything went up in smoke, meaning the very paper trail they'd need to prove the company's worth was totally gone.
Section 2. A 17 crore claim.
So with their business in absolute ruins, TVC Sky Shop obviously turned to the protection they had paid for, 2 standard fire and special perils policies from United India Insurance. Relying on whatever data they could piece together, the company calculated their total loss at a staggering 17.85 crore rupees. Now, when a number that massive hits the table, especially when the physical proof has just burned to the ground, the scrutiny is going to be incredibly intense.
And that intense scrutiny created an absolute maze of bureaucracy. The legal flowchart submitted as evidence during the proceedings maps out a ridiculously convoluted web of assessments, reassessments, preliminary reports, final reports, addendums, and rejections. It flawlessly captures the sheer, crushing weight of a corporate insurance claim of this magnitude.
Just think about this timeline for a second. A claim filed right after the fire in 2008 ends up bouncing back and forth through the corporate machinery for years. It gets rejected in 2010, rejected again in 2012, and ultimately spirals into a massive legal battle that didn't get a final judgment from the National Consumer Disputes Redressal Commission until 2026. Yeah, you heard that right. 18 years just to resolve a fire insurance claim? Absolutely insane.
Section 3. The war of surveyors.
So the insurance company didn't just sit back and accept that 17 crore figure. They sent in investigators. But here's where it gets wild. We see a massive, undeniable contradiction between two different professionals. On one hand, you have Ashok Chopra Co., a surveyor who concluded the claim was completely inadmissible, even going so far as to call the insured's accounts concocted and fraudulent. But then on the exact opposite side, you have Srivatsan, another surveyor who explicitly stated the claim is admissible, noting that all necessary documents were provided and no conditions were actually breached.
Reading the actual ink on the page from Ashok Chopra's addendum report, which was dated October 2010 but received in 2011, you can see just how heavily he leans into his suspicion. He states he had to make logical assumptions because, in his view, the insured had taken deliberate care to be as obtuse as possible and was deliberately withholding records. He basically viewed the reconstructed paper trail not as a desperate necessity after a catastrophic fire, but as a deliberate cover-up.
Operating under that heavy suspicion, Chopra concluded that even if the claim was somehow deemed valid, the absolute maximum payout would be just over 2.14 crore rupees. That is a drastic reduction, just a tiny fraction of the original 17.8 crore claim. But then we have Srivatsan's independent review. He actually physically visited locations and verified documents, and he evaluated the net loss payable at a staggering 11.97 crore rupees. I mean, we're talking about a nearly 10 crore gap between these two surveyors. It perfectly highlights just how chaotic and subjective this whole valuation process had become.
Section 4. The missing paper trail.
How do two highly trained experts come up with such wildly different conclusions? Well, when we dig into the internal corporate emails from December 24, 2010, we get a real look at what was happening behind the scenes. Srivatsan messages the insurance executives reporting he just spent 4 solid hours going through files from various offices. And his conclusion, most of the documents and information are available from these files. He literally just asked for a few extra things like bank statements to definitively prove or deny the first surveyor's allegations. So the paper trail wasn't entirely missing after all. And the insurance company's own logic is revealed the very next day. On Christmas Day 2010, another internal email confirms the head office officially advised Srivatsan to verify various aspects of the claim. Think about that. The insurance company themselves sought this second opinion. They actively wanted Srivatsan to get to the bottom of this document dispute.
And Srivatsan did exactly that. After his thorough investigation, his official assessment completely dismantled Chopra's argument about a missing paper trail. He stated clearly, right on the record, that the insured had provided all the necessary documents, books, and vouchers. His conclusion left zero room for doubt. Mr. Chopra's earlier report was simply incorrect. The paper trail actually was intact enough to validate the massive loss.
Section 5. The final repudiation.
So, despite their own officially instructed second surveyor validating the claim and finding the documents, the insurance company had a choice to make. On July 13, 2012, they issued a final official repudiation letter. In a truly stunning move, they chose to just ignore Srivatsan's findings entirely. Instead, they doubled down on Chopra's initial allegations of fraud and completely rejected the 17 crore claim. They just slammed the door shut.
In that repudiation letter, the insurer laid out their official legal defense. They claimed the policyholder breached General Conditions 1, 6IB, and 8. Essentially, they accused them of non-disclosure, lacking appropriate documents, and manipulating accounts. They were demanding a flawless, fully intact paper trail, which is pretty wild considering a 37-hour fire had just gutted the entire premises.
But here's where the legal framework really bites back. The complainant fought back using a Supreme Court precedent from Mooted Roadways. This precedent states that an insurance company is legally locked into the exact reasons they give in their final repudiation letter. They can't just invent new excuses or shift the goalposts years later in court. So by officially citing a lack of documents, when their own internal emails and second surveyor proved those documents were supplied, the insurance company boxed themselves into a massive legal corner. Which leaves us with a really chilling question for any business owner, one that echoes long after this 18-year saga. If disaster strikes and a fire destroys not just your physical assets, but the very corporate records you need to prove your claim, how do you validate your truth against a mountain of bureaucratic suspicion? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and always keep an eye on your paper trail.
Zuber & Company, fire forensic experts and forensic engineers. Seeking answers from ashes. Seeking answers.